Okay, so The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 7 is now out, and throughout this video we're going to be recapping the plot, breaking down all the Easter eggs, and also going over the characters that we get teasers to in this entry. Somehow, Heavy Spoilers has returned, and with this episode also clearly setting things up coming in Ahsoka, there's a lot to talk about in it. We of course also have the finale next week, so make sure you don't miss a thing by subscribing to the channel, and also please smash that thumbs up button if you enjoy the video.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
Anyway, last week saw the person we time travelled with in a man's DeLorean getting taken down by Bo and The Mandalorian.
Ha!
This was in an effort to get back to Bo's old crew, which is where she had an axe to grind over no longer being the leader. Defeating Woves, she was then presented with the Darksaber due to her technically winning it in combat all the way back in episode 2. That takes us into this entry, which sees the return of Moff Gideon and also the re-emergence of the Shadow Council. Gideon ends up getting his own Mandalorian armor in this entry, and you might remember that back in our episode 5 breakdown that we talked about a big clue towards this. Now shoutouts to Ryan Airy, bloody Ryan Airy.
Shut the f*** up, Ryan Airy!
But he pointed out in his last breakdown that they've added in a Mandalorian helmet to the beginning of the Disney Plus Star Wars logo. Many people thought this might be Mando, but he pointed out that this is shown in a red light, and this denotes that it's actually a villain. I actually think this might belong to Moff Gideon, and Gideon might even end up in full Mandalorian armor by the end of the season, which is a big huge time. So over the last 7 weeks, we got one theory time right. This was because of something Ryan Airy said, so I'm f***ing fuming.
Shut the f*** up, Ryan Airy.
Anyway, we start off on the planet Coruscant with Elia Kane making her way through the streets. Heavily inspired by Blade Runner, we see her long trench coat and the Tokyo-inspired city washed with a blue filter and neon lights. In the Blade Runner story, Earth was coming off the back of World War III, and poisonous toxins had been released into the air, which destroyed the atmosphere. This is why it was always raining in LA, and why the sun was almost completely absent. In the case of Coruscant, there's obviously lots of traffic and skyscrapers, and the further down you go, the darker it is because there's less light able to penetrate the vast blanket of cars and buildings. This is happening at night, but the lower levels of the city do tend to be the more crime-infested ones. There was actually a cancelled Boba Fett game called 1313 which would take place on that level of the city and show us all the criminal dealings that we have going on there. Elia is then approached by a probe droid, and she gives a TK number as her identification. TK was a designation given to all Imperial stormtroopers and officers, and this shows where her allegiances lie. Now in the Dr. Pershing episode, we did theorize that she was punishing Pershing for betraying Moff Gideon. In the second season, he was the one who told Mando and Co where Gideon's ship was, and the entire ploy now seems like it was to get revenge for selling him out. It's important to bear in mind that she's really working as a triple agent, and though her loyalties lie with Gideon, she's also working for the Republic, pretending to be a spy for them so that she can oust amnesty officers. Because she betrayed Pershing, I'm sticking with the punishment angle, but she may also be fishing out people for Gideon who could turn and aid him. Now she's also been keeping an eye on the dealings of what's been going on with all this stuff this side, and she reports the things on Navarro along with the pirates. Revealing that it was the Mandalorians that helped Greef, she also informs Gideon that the two sworn enemies have teamed up. Now this video is brought to you by Manscaped. Now April is actually Testicular Cancer Awareness Month, so we thought we'd team up with them to raise awareness and fundraise for a good cause. Now did you know that one guy every hour, every day is diagnosed with testicular cancer? So this is a reminder to all men out there, check yourself. Manscaped, in addition to providing the right tools and solutions for safe and easy manscaping, has partnered with the Testicular Cancer Society to spread awareness for men's health and early cancer detection. So while you're down there cleaning up your sack, why not just give it a little feel, see if there's any lumps, changes, or if you feel pain. We can save balls together. Now together, to remind guys to check for testicular cancer, for a limited time only, you get this amazing new Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0. This is a special edition purple one. It's completely waterproof. It's got that 4000K LED technology so it can light up your face as you're shaving. There's only 10,000 units as well. Only 10,000 of them. And once it's gone, it's gone. Also with the launch of the special edition Lawnmower 4.0, Manscaped are going to be donating $50,000. Yes, $50,000 to their longtime partner, the Testicular Cancer Society, to help those impacted by testicular cancer. Get the new Lawnmower 4.0 TCS Special Edition trimmer and help Manscaped raise awareness and give back to the Testicular Cancer Society. Visit manscaped.com/TCS to learn more about how to check yourself while enjoying your Manscaped products at home. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code HEAVYSpoilers at checkout when you go to manscaped.com. That's 20% off, free shipping, and just go to manscaped.com and enter the code HEAVYSpoilers. I've left the link in the description if you want to head over there right now and get this amazing purple trimmer, donates to charity, and also just raises awareness for testicular cancer. Thanks. Now the episode itself is called The Spies, and this two-parter sees Mando getting captured come the end of the entry. After the intro with Elia, we cut to Moff Gideon and see him in a long corridor with doors that we also saw in The Phantom Menace. The stormtrooper designs here have been slightly altered, and we see that these are slowly inching towards how they looked with the First Order. Ain't nothing more menacing than a character walking down a corridor with a cape, and we discover that the reason he escaped was because he supplied the Imperials with Beskar. This is why Teva found the metal signature in the shuttle, and also why they end up taking on the things that they do costume-wise throughout this century. The Moff would of course be highly sought after, as he led the attack in the Night of 1,000 Years that wiped out millions of Mandalorians. He was also a high-ranking ISB officer, and getting their hands on him meant that they'd stop him from spilling secrets. Now originally the Republic wanted to put him on trial for war crimes, but the Imperials getting him out has only emboldened him further. We then see him walking through a laboratory, and in there we can catch cloning tanks with figures inside. Now as we later learn, there are parts of the Imperials that are partaking in an experiment called Project Necromancer. Somehow Palpatine returns, and I think that the series in Ahsoka will be going over all the ins and outs that got the story to where it was in The Rise of Skywalker. We know from the back and forth nature of the trilogy that this was kinda tacked on at the end, with the original plan being that Snoke would be the big bad, and that Palps was put into Rise of Skywalker late into the production. Whether this cloning was always part of the plan is another thing entirely, as there were rumours that Matt Smith was supposed to be playing a younger version of the character. Again, that might not be the case, but they have at least went back and tried to fill in the blanks between the series and what's to come. The tanks that we saw back in Season 2 Episode 5 very much foreshadow this, and the version we see here is way closer to being a human. I'm guessing that they created Palpatine first, and then Palps went on to create Snoke, and then used him as a puppet. I've no idea why he didn't just use himself, because it would look much more impressive if Palps was back from the dead, but after the Empire's big failing, maybe my man just wanted to use his burner account to lead the First Order. Either way, we are slowly starting to see how the Emperor came back, even if there are others that wanted his position. Now this kind of takes us into the Shadow Council, who we see in hologram in the next room. Titled the Shadow Council because they worked from the shadows, the first thing we hear them talking about is how they can't show any signs of true strength as it might tip off the Republic. They refuse to even meet with one another face to face, and I love how we have this hologram meeting that keeps things secretive by having them all in different locations in space. After the destruction of the second Death Star, many sides of it fractured off into their own thing, but the Council brought together all these different sides in order to try and keep things going. Seen as essential to keeping the Imperials alive, it basically formed somewhat of a union between these sides in which they could plot and plan away. However, there were things inside of it that caused this to fall apart, and though it was formed by Gallius Rax, he planned to eliminate the Council at the Battle of Jakku. This would leave just Brendel Hux alive, as he saw him being an essential element of how to salvage the Empire. Now the first person that we see is an unnamed bald commander. Not shaming the guy for having no hair. Yeah, I'm losing some of mine, but his appearance is actually important. In the comics, we know that Hux killed an Imperial officer, and though I may be clutching at straws, I think this guy is him. Honestly, I just love the tone of this opening. I know you guys went hard on me for complaining last week, but the series has taken things so seriously that I kind of thought they messed up with the overall feeling of the series. Here though, I think it's really gripping, and there's so much atmosphere early on that just lets you know they're taking all these things very seriously. I'll stop going on about last week, I promise, and the next officer we see is Gilad Palian, who's also a major character in the expanded lore. One of the high-ranking generals of the Empire, he's someone who was enthralled with Thrawn in several of the side novels and stories. Making a voice appearance in Rebels, I think that he will probably become a big player in Ahsoka due to Thrawn being the big bad of that. Captain of the Naval Star Destroyer Harbinger, he was initially a member of the Third Fleet, however he switched sides with Thrawn once the original Grand Admiral of that was exposed as a traitor. This was all to do with Project Stardust, which, as we learned in Rogue One, centered around the creation of the Death Star. Palian ended up joining Thrawn's 7th Fleet, and in the canon, he notably helped run a blockade on Lothal. In the Legends storyline, he was second in command to Thrawn, and it's possible that this is how he'll be integrated into things coming down the line. They're very much relishing in the New Republic's failings, and they know they have supporters out there that will get behind them with the re-emergence of Thrawn. Now, Thrawn is someone that everyone went wild for after he was teased at in the Ahsoka episode in Season 2. We know that she's hunting him, and that he's gonna appear in live action during her solo series in August. Played by Lars Mikkelsen, he appeared on stage at Star Wars Celebration, and an image of him was dropped in full costume. I did put this on my Instagram account, but it got taken down, and the whole thing's now been restricted, so I'd rather just avoid using it in this video, but it's everything you'd expect. Blue skin, red eyes, and his white suit. Now in the canon, he's appeared in both the original Legends lore and the Disney reboots, bringing his strategic mind state to the position of dominance throughout the entire galaxy. Cited as being the heir to the Empire, Thrawn was very much someone who was seen as being the next in line to take over things, and I was actually surprised that they ended up going with Snoke in the sequel trilogy instead of using him. First heard of the guy in the N64 Shadows of the Empire game. He's actually got a really interesting backstory. Born on the planet Rentor, he travelled out of the unknown regions of the galaxy after making a name for himself in the Chiss Academy. Known for his ruthless and strategic mind, he was able to think 4 steps ahead of his enemies, making him an almost unbeatable opponent. Now, upon making his way out amongst the stars, he ended up running into Anakin Skywalker, who he aided in finding Padme. Impressed with him, Anakin ended up bringing him before Palpatine, who too was enthroned when it came to meeting him. Thrawn said that he thought democracy was a waste of time, and that the only way to create order was to rule through oppression. He agreed to enlist in the Royal Imperial Academy once things changed, and he went on to become the Grand Admiral. From this point on, he took over the 7th Fleet, and along with the Shadow Council, they kept the heart of the Empire alive. Anyway, they also drop a very important line, and we see that Commandant Hux is also amongst them. As you might have guessed, he's actually the father of Armitage Hux, played by Domhnall Gleeson in the sequel trilogy. They did a great bit of casting here, and if you think the pair look similar, it's because Brendol's actually played by Domhnall's real-life brother Brian. Now, Hux started off as a junior officer in the Grand Army of the Republic, and he was a character that greatly admired the ways of the Jedi. He saw them as warriors who took children from a young age and trained them to become soldiers that kept order throughout the galaxy. Working his way up the military, he saw firsthand how ineffective stormtroopers could be, and the Jedi had given him the idea that children should be trained from a young age. He believed that enlisting children from birth would not only create loyalty to the Empire, but that it would also make it so they had a lifetime of training to mold them into the perfect combatant. This is why we saw in the likes of Finn how he'd been taken when he was very young, and it was something that he and his Shadow Council constantly tried to put in place. Now, this idea that kids had to be a certain way is something that's carried over to his personal life too. We know at one point that he was married to a woman called Maratel, but the man was playing around on the side, and he ended up having Armitage illegitimately with a kitchen woman. We have some, it says kitchen woman in the wiki, not my phrasing. Now, we have some flashbacks of how he treated Hux Jr. in the comics, and it's clear that he viewed him as a disappointment. Brendol was abusive towards him, and this is probably what spurred Armitage on to end up the way that he did in the First Order. We're kind of unsure of all the ins and outs dealings that Brendol had with the First Order, but we do know that he oversaw the training program carried out by Captain Phasma. However, deep down, she secretly hated him, and along with Armitage, they conspired to take him out. Getting an untraceable poison, she injected Brendol with a toxin, and it slowly started to kill him from the inside out. Going to medical droids for help, they found themselves unable to treat him because of their lack of knowledge concerning exactly what was wrong with him. He resigned himself to a Bacta tank, back to them again, and this is where he withered into nothing. In the end, he dissolved away in it, down to his atoms, only leaving behind some organs, a tuft of grey hair, and a couple of bones. Armitage helped to sow the seeds of doubt with what happened to him, and he pushed the narrative that Brendol had travelled into further reaches of the galaxy on an exploration mission. Whether this is brought into future parts of the Disney Plus show or not remains to be seen, but we do know that he's working on resurrecting the Emperor. Titled Project Necromancer, this is a cloning program that will allow one to create duplicates, which can possess midichlorians and therefore wield the Force. This has been the endgame all along, and it's why the client was so desperate to get his hands on Grogu all the way back in the first episode. Dr. Pershing, of course, wore the cloner's badge, and if you've been keeping up with the Bad Batch, then you'll know that cloning was a big part of that too. They are very much attempting to create an heir to the Empire, and also a Thrawn in the side of the Republic. Anyway, that's the main people in this chamber, and we discover that Thrawn is missing from the Council. Kinda guessing that he might show up next week in a post-credit scene or something, and Gideon is kinda scoffing at the idea that he's coming back. We actually thought that it would be revealed that Gideon was working for him, but he seems to be doing the opposite and actually trying to prop up new leadership. Necromancer is seen as the place for that, and though Gideon denies being involved with it, we know that he very much is. Guy, of course, held Pershing on Navarro, and hey, what's in that back room there, mate? Let's have a look. Now, Gideon wants them to pool their efforts and share their resources, and he requests Praetorian Guards and also TIE interceptors and bombers. He, of course, was behind the attack on Bo's home planet, and with her and Mando managing to take some out, they're having to restock. Now, the Praetorian Guards first showed up in The Last Jedi when we look at things in terms of release order. They were one of the good parts of that film, controversial, and it led to the big battle in the throne room after Snoke's death. The Praetorians themselves were meant to build off the back of the Imperial Royal Guards, who we first saw in Return of the Jedi. These crimson armor-wearing security forces were masters in several forms of martial arts, including Terras Cassi, which you'll probably know from the PS1 game. These were often tasked with protecting high-ranking individuals, which is why they were put in charge of guarding Snoke on his flagship, the Supremacy. They actually have a long and rich history in our own world too, and Praetorian Guards were actually high-ranking members of the Roman army. Tasked with protecting senators, politicians, and officials, they were highly trained bodyguards who worked as security escorts for over 3 centuries. Here, they strike an amazing figure and offer these Mandalorian serial tests that ends up leading to the death of a big character who we'll talk about later on. Anyway, Gideon correctly guesses that the Mandalorians are trying to take back the planet, and thus they send the reinforcements to him. Gideon spins around, and it kind of makes me wonder what this looked like as a hologram to them, because they just see him from one angle, so is he spinning on the spot, or is the camera following him? I don't know. Anyway, from here we cut to Navarro and see that the IG-11 statue has been fully dismantled. They are still recovering from the pirate bombardment, and things seemingly get worse as the light cruiser comes over the city. As we said last week, this belonged to Moff Gideon, but Axe Woves and co took it back, and they've now put a mythosaur symbol on the bottom of it. As we saw in episode 5, I think, the Mandalorians have been given this plot of land next to the lava flats, and they're very much making a home for themselves. Initially, they had to hide in the sewers below the city, but them now being on the surface shows how much things have changed. And Navarro has very much been through the ringer in the series, but every time we visited, it seems to have gotten better and better. The Kowakian monkey lizards were getting spit roasted in season 1, not like that, and now they're living it up in the trees. At this point, the pirates have been brought down, and the Empire's also been cleared out too, which could allow it to prosper even further. I think that this planet is very much the new Mandalorians' home, and though they are desperate to reclaim Mandalore, with it being a literal bomb site, I think that they will forge somewhere new here. Home is where the heart is, or some shit. And thus I think they'll probably settle here instead, and that's the end of Theory Time. You did too many last week, so I pretended I wasn't going to do any this week, but we're back. Time, you sucker, you fell for it, you sucker, you fucking dickhead. Anyway, these creeds are supposed to hate one another, and the unmasking doesn't go down too well. However, Bo is the one that can unite them all, as she has walked both ways, now wearing a Night Owl and Mythosaur signet on her shoulders. We also see the armor once more, and the horns on her helmet are very symbolic, as we also get them return later on with Gideon and his forces. These horns were put in place when Darth Maul took over the Death Watch, who too get name dropped later on in this entry. They were put in place to show that they were loyal to him, and it of course mirrored the horns that he had on his head. Here I think it's meant to denote Imperial Alliance, but the armor having them could hint to what's really going on with her. If you've been keeping up with our breakdowns, and we theorise that she might actually be revealed to be recast, and this being in place definitely seems to cement that. The Shadow Collective member was a devout follower of Darth Maul, and she even clashed against Bo Katan at one point in the Clone Wars. Her colours are the same, and she also has horns on her helmet like what Rook had in the Clone Wars, so because of this people have started to think that they are the same person. Now the reason that I'm bringing this up again is because one of our subscribers, Katie Doyle, sent me a great little clip from the Forge that might hint to this even more. In it, if you look closely in the water, you actually get what looks like it could be Darth Maul. This forge has been known to reveal hidden things about the past, and it's of course also where Grogu saw my man Ahmed best. He's back, baby! I do think that if she was a follower of Maul, that she is too trying to find redemption, and that's very much what this season has been about. We had Mando having to bathe in the living waters, Bo becoming a leader once more, Dr. Pershing trying to move on from the past, and so on and so forth. All of these have tried to achieve something better, and though some have failed, there's definitely this theme laced in a lot of the characters. This could be carried across to the armor too, and obviously let me know below if you agree with the theory or not. Anyway, Greef arrives and he brings with him the IG-12 mech suit that becomes Grogu's armor in the entry. Driven by Nanzellan, these of course been working away on him since episode 1 and have now wiped his memory and drive to kill Grogu. Bad baby. It's a big swing that's definitely going to sell a lot of toys, and it allows Grogu to step it up a level and become closer to your typical Mandalorian. IG-11 or IG-12 is of course based off IG-88, who was a bounty hunter that appeared alongside Boba Fett. He too was a boss in the Shadows of the Empire, which saw Thrawn introduced, and as I've been saying, it's all connected. Now being repurposed means that we can kind of get a sort of Jarvis voiceover down the line, with Taika Waititi potentially coming back to do that. I think when they're developing Grogu's voice, they are kind of taking it easy and testing the waters because they want to get it right first time so that he doesn't sound like an idiot. Thus allowing IG-12 to answer questions, it gives him sort of an ability to communicate, but also doesn't mess things up when he starts sounding like, "Hello, it's me, baby Grogu." And they walk through the streets, and will you subscribe? Yes, yes, yes. They then go to a vendor and get some Mandalorian fruit, which has shown up at many points in the Clone Wars and Bad Batch. Anyway, we cut to the campsite at night, and bruh, I guess we know what happened to those 2 baby birds. Fuck me, yeah. Unintentionally made me laugh out loud, and even though I'm a vegetarian, yeah, seeing them get spit roasted, I was like, dear me. Now there's a feeling of unease around the camp as we have 2 different sects of competing ideologies. It's basically getting political, but Bo makes it clear that they all have the same goal and need to work together to take back the planet. She wants to scout the surface and go to the Great Forge, which, as we've learned, is very much the heart of their culture. We also get foreshadowing with the mention of the bombings unearthing beasts that have laid dormant. People volunteer from both sides, with it pretty much being your main characters and a couple of red shirts as well. Now the fleet head out, and upon arriving at Mandalore, we see the storms in the atmosphere that ravage the planet. Gonna point out a plot hole I'm hoping you can explain, but in this episode and episode 2, they make it pretty clear that you can't send comms out of the storm. So I don't know how Gideon managed to hold his 4K hologram meetings earlier, unless it's a different planet. Anyway, we get a dropship moment that riffs on the pirate one from before, and see them surveying all the wreckage below. We also see the Death Watch patch on one of their arms, and these were who rescued Mando as a child. Bo was also part of them too, and as we learn, they kind of fractured off into these smaller groups. The Children of the Watch later evolved from them, and it's nice seeing the Mandalorians all coming together. Anyway, they survey the wreckage and begin to look for the forge. We also see Bo address the Night Owls too, and this is very much the first mission of them all working together. Now this pointer barge approaches with fins and sails similar to Jabba's. These survivors remained on the planet, but they struggled to get off world due to not having a ship capable of space travel. They asked for food, and this might be riffing on Treasure Island, in which Ben Gunn asked if the people he came across had any cheese with them. This was actually also given a nod to in Blade Runner 2049 when Kay comes across Deckard, though I might be tying these all things together because it's a big massive reach. Now they bring with them stories about how they refused to surrender and thus were punished because of it. However, Bo admits that she did actually surrender, and this is how the Moff ended up with the lightsaber. Mandalorians are of course supposed to fight even in the face of death, and it clearly doesn't sit well with the rest of the group. This may cause further conflict down the line, as this action by her of course led to millions of deaths. Her sister Satine was a pacifist too, and if they fail to retake the planet next week, then she may be seen as being the wrong person in charge. Either way, Mando agrees to serve her by saying that he's more bothered about honouring character than he is about tradition in the Darksaber. The survivors then agree to take them to the Great Forge, and we watch as they sail out. We see Axe and Pazz playing chess, with it showing how each side has their own rules. I love Paz's vibrating blade, and it seems like it was ripped right out of Dune. It leads to a fight between the pair, with this very much being symbolic of what Bo's gonna have to deal with. Mandalorian culture is racked with civil war, and the planet looks the way it does in part because the centuries of infighting turned it into this desert. Grogu then breaks it up, and him being the future of the planet is something I think we could see down the line due to him actually handling the situation. Now we watched the armor jet off into space, and Eric Voss was saying on Twitter how this was pretty convenient. The episode itself is called The Spies, and it may even be revealed that she is working with Gideon. This would explain the Horns connection too, and we may even learn that the Moff worked alongside Maul at one point. Our editor Matt said that Gideon might have actually recruited the Death Watch in the past, and I think this would be a pretty big reveal. Anyway, as they sail out, we see as they're attacked by a giant beast that destroys the barge and forces them to go underground. Now this battle with the beast is something that's steeped in Mandalorian culture. I actually think next week we'll likely have a showdown with the Mythosaur, and slowly we've been building up these larger monsters and creatures for the Mandos to fight off against. Episode 2 had the Mud Beast, and Season 2 had the Crate Dragon in its first entry. At the start of this, we had the giant crocodile, and then the bird, before we now get to this. Slowly, they are ramping up the size and scale. I think it's so that we can get used to the idea that the characters will be fighting bigger threats. I'm sure there's one I'm missing out that list of monsters, but you get the point with it. Now, instead of the Mythosaur, they might actually end up fighting this, and who knows, they might even use the Mythosaur to take it down. Anyway, they rush underground and make it to the Great Forge. At this point, troopers come in and...
Oh, they fly now!
They fly now! They fly now!
It's possible that these might even be Imperial Super Commandos that were Mandalorian warriors loyal to the Galactic Empire. They did appear in the Clone Wars, wore jetpacks, and fought like what we see here, so I might be reaching, but that could definitely be the case. Anyway, this leads to a big battle against them in which some die and others are chased underground. We see the subsurface has been transformed with more Imperial looking tunnels dotted throughout it. The Forge is very much a place that you rebuild from, and it's clear that the Empire have started to launch out from here. Feels like one of the best action scenes in the show, and they stumble across some giant hangars and armies of Gideon's forces. Now the inside of this kinda reminded me a bit of Ilum from Fallen Order. Its crystalline structure is extremely memorable, and it's also where Jedi would travel to in order to build their lightsabers. Now this is an important place for them to potentially get due to what we know about Ilum down the line. Though this isn't fully confirmed, when you return to it later on in the game, you'll see that it's getting construction done on it that resembles Starkiller Base. It's possible that when Mandalore was transformed in this glass-like structure that the Imperials saw a place they could build a weapon like this, and they may be after the planet for that specific reason. However, we do learn that Gideon has used it to create an evolution of the Dark Trooper suit, so maybe that's the sole intention. Now though Mando uses his flamethrower valiantly, he's eventually caught up in wires and Gideon arrives rocking his brand new suit. Gonna make a sick action figure, gonna sell loads of Funko Pops that, and he reveals the purge of Mandalore will now be completed. Mando has brought the fleet to them, and he sends out the bombers that are obviously gonna lead to a big space battle next week. Spoilers for that. Now the Moff then demands the Darksaber back, but whereas Bo once surrendered, she refuses to now. She attempts to cut through the hangar doors, and this of course was something we saw Qui-Gon doing during the Phantom Menace. This allows her and the rest to escape, but Paz stays behind so he can buy the others time. He takes out all the guards on the platform, but the Praetorian Guards arrive in new stylized helmets similar to a Mandalorian. Paz busts out his personal combat shield, and these were part of the Mandalorian's armor that were built to fight the Jedi. They can actually block a lightsaber, but they don't stand up too well when there's 5 people stabbing you. Now Paz's death obviously brings a lot with it, as he has his son that we met in this season. Mandalorians are famous for taking in foundlings, and if one of their tribe dies, then it's on the others to raise them. I very much think this will be the case with what happens going forwards, and his son will carry on the Vizsla name. I don't think that they introduced his child by accident, and they clearly wanted to let us know that the name would be carried on for further entries. His famous ancestor Tar Vizsla brought the Mandos and Jedi together, and he also created the Darksaber that unites the entire people. Pre-Vizsla was Bo's leader at one point, and Paz of course has been a big thing in the show. Anyway, we close out on his body, ending the entry on a dour note. We don't know what Bo's doing after this, but I'm guessing that she's going to help the fleet in space and then potentially go and get reinforcements from the other planets. I'm guessing that this means we could see a return of Boba Fett and potentially Tiva and some of the rebels. They'll likely bring Greef across too, and I can imagine that many people who featured in the series will probably make a return. This idea of him being captured, of course, riffs on the fact that Grogu was captured last season, but why they just don't kill the guy, I'll never know. Bo being the lead in charge of getting him back also shows the direction that the series is going into, and at Star Wars Celebration, the creative team made it clear that the Mandalorian title was used as a way to now talk about other characters, and they didn't want to just keep the focus solely on Din. This series has definitely taken more focus on Bo, and there's even the possibility that they might kill Mando off next week and pass things over to her fully. I think that's a long shot, and I don't want to get too much into the gossip and rumours, but there have been things floating around for a while that Pedro might be leaving soonish, and thus they want to keep the story going with other characters. That's definitely a possibility too, and I think it would be difficult to just go back to episodes about Mando and Grogu off on adventures in the galaxy after Mandalore's taken back. I think that they're also going to capitalise on the Mythosaur thing, with Bo potentially taking it down and being fully anointed as the leader. Grogu for me is where the real future lies though, and due to his lifespan, I can see him being a character that carries on the Mandalorian legacy for centuries. Like Tar Vizsla, he's half Jedi, half Mandalorian, and thus he could be the character down the line that ends up leading them all. Maybe Mando will reject living with them, but yeah, Lots of things that could happen next week. Now we'll also likely see things getting set up for the Ahsoka series too. I'm really sorry I haven't done a full breakdown of that trailer, as this Easter weekend has been kinda hectic, and I've been kinda putting my family on the back burner recently to work on videos, so I just wanted as much free time with them as I could get. Still though, they kept dropping trailers, but yeah, unfortunately, priorities, they lay with some other people who dislike the video. I don't give a shit. Now the main thing to take from that trailer is that Thrawn is of course returning, and that we will heavily be tying in with elements of Rebels. They've even made the final shot of the series in live action, and Sabine, Hera, Chopper and Ezra will also be coming over from that. Thrawn even possibly appears in front of Mount Tantus, and they may be leading with that in this show. It's all going down, and I personally think that the new look is brilliant. I'm just hoping that tying it into Rebels so much doesn't scare people off who don't have any idea what's going on. I do think that Star Wars is kind of pulling from the cartoons a bit too much, and there's a lot of my normie mates who've stopped watching because they have no idea who these people are. I think when we look back at some of the fan favourites from this series, they were created and introduced for this series, and yeah, I think personally just sticking with them might have been the better way to go about it. Now as for my thoughts on this entry, I really enjoyed it, and I think it's up there as being one of the best Mandalorian episodes. When they take things seriously like this, you know, they give us drama, tension, explore history and culture of the Mandalorians. I really get invested, and hopefully we see more of this in the finale next week. I'm sure we will, because this feels like it's a two-parter, and with it being from the same director, it seems like it's going to be good. Everything kind of evolved at this point with us getting Moff Gideon wearing that, the introduction of the Shadow Council, and it just sets up so many things that they can capitalize on next week. Obviously we'll see, and that closes out the latest entry, so let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Also, I'd love to hear your predictions for next week, if you think they've got enough time to really deliver on this season. So yeah, just comment below and let your boy know. Now we are in a competition right now and giving away the Superman 4K box set to 3 subscribers on the 15th. And all you have to do to be on the chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the episode. We pick the comments at random on the 15th, and the winners of the last one are on screen right now. So if that's you, then message me on Twitter at Heavy Spoilers. If you want something else to watch, we've got a breakdown on screen right now. Might be the Marvels trailer, and we are working on a bigger breakdown of that at the moment, but yeah, that's going to be hopefully coming out later on today. So keep an eye out for that, and yeah, I'll see you over at that video or whatever's on screen right now. You take care of yourself. Peace.